They say a man's past is written in blood, and no one knows this better than Colt Mercer. For 20 years, his gun has been for hire to the highest bidder, no questions asked. But his latest job changes everything. A powerful land baron wants a widow and her child eliminated. Just another day's work for a hardened gunslinger. Except when he finds them, the boy calls him Dad, mistaking him for the father he barely remembers. In that moment, something breaks inside the killer's heart. Now Colt must choose between the money he's owed and the family he never knew he wanted. But in the unforgiving West, second chances come with a price. What happens when the most feared Gunslinger in the territory becomes a marked man for protecting the very people he was hired to kill? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The whiskey glass trembled against the scarred oak bar, disturbed by the stomping boots overhead. Colt Mercer's weathered fingers traced the rim, his eyes fixed on nothing and everything in the dim saloon. 20 years of gunwork had taught him to watch reflections in dirty mirrors and listen for the whisper of leather against wood. The Diamondback Saloon in Fort Sherman wasn't the worst place he'd waited for work, but it was far from the best. A trio of cowboys at the corner table had been stealing glances his way since sundown. They knew who he was, everyone did. The name Colt Mercer carried weight in these territories, though few knew the man behind the legend. Fewer still knew he'd earned his reputation not through speed, but through patience. A patient man was a dangerous man, his father used to say, before a hangman's noose proved him right. The bat-wing doors creaked, and Theodore Blackwood's shadow stretched across the sawdust floor. Even without turning, Colt knew it was him. Wealthy men moved differently, like they were testing the ground's worthiness beneath their feet, rather than their own balance. Blackwood's boots, too clean for these parts, stopped beside him. "Mr. Mercer." Blackwood's voice carried the refined edge of Eastern schooling wrapped around Western ambition. "I believe we have mutual interests to discuss." Colt raised his glass slightly, an invitation without warmth. Blackwood settled onto the adjacent stool, his crisp black suit out of place among the trail dust and sweat stains that colored the saloon's usual clientele. "I've got a problem that needs solving," Blackwood continued, ordering whiskey with a gesture that suggested he'd rather not touch anything in the establishment. "Delicate matter. Requires discretion. Discretion costs extra." Colt's voice was gravel and smoke, worn smooth by years of hard living. The land baron smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Money's not the issue. There's a piece of land I've been trying to acquire. Choice property, water rights, perfect for my railroad plans. But there's a complication." There always is. A widow, Rebecca Quinn, living there with her boy, claiming rights through her dead husband's deed. Blackwood paused, swirling his untouched whiskey. "She's expecting another child. Makes things messy, public sentiment being what it is. I've tried being reasonable, offered 3 times what the land's worth, but she's got it in her head that she's keeping her husband's legacy alive." Colt had heard this story before. Different names, same ending. "You want them gone? I want the problem solved." Blackwood's voice hardened. "Clean, quiet, tragic. A fire, perhaps. Something that won't raise questions. Winter's coming, accidents happen." The whiskey in Colt's glass had grown warm. He set it down, unopened, and named a price that would make most men flinch. Blackwood didn't blink, just reached into his vest and pulled out a banknote that would cover half now, half later. "The property's a day's ride north," Blackwood said, standing. "Burned cabin, can't miss it. Previous attempt got interrupted." He straightened his cuffs. "I'd appreciate this being handled before the week's out." Colt pocketed the money without counting it. "It'll be done." Blackwood nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing, Mr. Mercer. The boy, make it quick. He's only 6 after all." Something old and cold stirred in Colt's chest, but his face remained impassive. He'd stopped counting the dead years ago, stopped asking if they deserved it. A job was a job, and a reputation like his didn't allow for selective mercy. The land. Baron's footsteps faded, and Colt finally lifted his glass, downing the warm whiskey in a single swallow. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. By this time tomorrow, he'd be riding north, carrying death to a widow and her child, adding 2 more ghosts to the long procession that followed him through sleepless nights. But for now, he sat in the growing darkness, listening to the tired piano player murder a tune about home and redemption, wondering when he'd stopped believing in either. Dawn painted the mountains in shades of ash and iron as Colt guided his horse along the northern trail. The air carried winter's promise, sharp enough to cut through his wool coat and remind him that time was growing short. Soon the passes would close, and survival would become a daily negotiation with the elements. Perhaps that's what Blackwood was counting on. Nature to finish whatever Colt started. The charred Bible in his saddlebag weighed on his mind. He'd found it half buried in mud near an abandoned campsite, its pages warped but still legible. Inside, careful handwriting recorded the Quinn family history. Births, deaths, marriages. The last entry, written in a different hand, marked Thomas, Quinn's death. Beloved husband and father taken too soon. The ink was barely 6 months dry. Colt had done his research in town before heading out. Thomas Quinn had been a surveyor, good with maps and mathematics. He'd spotted the water rights, value before anyone else, filed the proper papers, planned for his family's future. Then he died in a hunting accident that left powder burns on his chest, the kind of burns that come from close range. The trail curved around a ridge, and Colt reined his horse to a stop. Below, in a small valley carved by a persistent stream, stood the half-burned cabin. Smoke rose from its intact chimney, defiant against the morning chill. Through his field glasses, he could see signs of recent repairs. New logs patching the burned section, a carefully tended vegetable garden, stacked firewood that would last through winter. Movement caught his eye. A boy emerged from behind the cabin, dragging a small wagon loaded with kindling. Even at this distance, Colt could see the determined set of his shoulders, the way he attacked his chores, with the seriousness of a child trying to fill a man's boots. Micah Quinn, age 6, now the man of the house. The door opened again, and Rosalie Quinn stepped out. Her pregnancy was obvious even beneath her heavy shawl, but she moved with purpose, helping her son with the wood. She paused to rest one hand on her belly, the other shielding her eyes as she scanned the ridgeline. For a moment, Colt felt exposed. Though he knew his position was well concealed, something shifted in his chest, an old ache he thought he'd buried years ago. He'd seen her type before, women carved from frontier hardwood who bent but didn't break, women who looked at an impossible situation and simply decided to outlast it. His own mother had been cut from similar cloth before consumption took her and left him to learn the world's harder lessons alone. The boy stumbled, spilling his kindling. Instead of scolding him, Rosalie knelt awkwardly to help, and their laughter carried up the ridge on the morning air. The sound struck Colt like a physical blow. When was the last time he'd heard genuine laughter? In his line of work, he usually only heard the bitter kind, or the desperate variety that preceded begging. He watched them work together, noting their routines, the rhythms of their day. Professional habits died hard, but for the first time in years, the familiar process of planning death felt wrong, like putting a bullet through a hymn. A raven croaked nearby, and Colt's horse shifted uneasily. The bird watched him with ancient eyes, and he remembered his grandmother's warnings about ravens being messengers, carriers of omens. She'd been full of such superstitions, but living by the gun had taught Colt to respect signs and instincts. Right now, everything in him was saying to turn back, to forget this contract. But professional pride was a harsh mistress, and reputations had to be maintained. One moment of weakness could undo 20 years of carefully cultivated fear. He'd worked too hard, killed too many, to falter now over a woman's quiet strength and a boy's laughter. Tomorrow, he decided, He'd do it tomorrow. Tonight, he would make camp in the hills and watch, learn their patterns, plan it clean and quick, like Blackwood wanted. Give them one more day of life, one more sunset to share. It was the closest thing to mercy he had left to offer. Morning frost crunched under Colt's boots as he approached the cabin. He'd chosen the hour before dawn, when sleep ran deepest. Better that way. They'd never know what hit them. His gun felt heavier than usual against his hip, each step bringing him closer to a deed that couldn't be undone. The cabin's single window glowed faintly. Lamplight or banked coals, he couldn't tell. As he neared, something caught his eye, a piece of paper nailed beside the door. He moved closer, breath clouding in the pre-dawn air. It was a child's drawing, done in charcoal, on the back of an old wanted poster. A family portrait, a tall man, in a hat, a smiling woman, and a small boy between them. The man's face was carefully detailed, with a beard and eyes that stared out from the paper with surprising intensity. Colt's hand trembled as he touched the drawing. The face looked back at him like a mirror darkened by time. The same weathered features, the same deep-set eyes. Even the way the hat sat on the man's head matched his own habitual tilt. A coincidence that felt like an accusation. The door's hinges betrayed him with a creak. He'd meant to slip in silent as a shadow, but the sound carried in the still morning air. His hand moved to his gun, instincts honed by violence taking over as footsteps approached from inside. "Papa!" The word froze him like a bullet to the heart. Micah Quinn stood in the doorway, sleep-tousled and squinting in the grey light. The boy's eyes widened, hope blazing across his face like sunrise. "Papa! Mama! Mama! He came back! Just like—" "You said—" Micah launched himself forward, arms outstretched. Colt's hands hung useless at his sides as the boy collided with his legs, small arms wrapping around him with complete trust. His gun felt like it was burning through his holster, marking him with shame. "Micah?" Rosalie Quinn's voice carried from inside, followed by her silhouette in the doorway. She stopped short, one hand going to her belly, the other gripping the door frame. In the lamplight, her face showed no fear, only a complex mixture of hope, doubt, and something else Colt couldn't name. Words failed him for the first time in years. "Mom, there's been a mistake." "Mama, look," God answered. "Your prayers. You said he'd send somebody to help us through the winter, and he sent Papa back." Micah's joy was a living thing, too pure for this cold morning and Colt's colder purpose. Rosalie's eyes met his, and in them he saw understanding dawn. She knew who he was, or at least what he was. A gunman, not a ghost. Death, not deliverance. But instead of screaming or begging, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "Would you like some coffee, sir? It's bitter and probably too strong, but it's hot." The invitation startled him more than any gunshot. "Mom, I'm not—" "I know who you're not," she said softly so the boy couldn't hear. "But Micah's been drawing that picture of his father every day for months. Seems God has a sense of humor, sending us a man who looks so much like him." Micah tugged at his hand. "Come see my room, Papa. I kept all my promises. I've been doing my chores and taking care of Mama, just like you said." The boy's other hand clutched a folded paper. Another drawing, Colt realized, one of many that probably papered the walls of his room, each a prayer for his father's return, rendered in charcoal and faith. 20 years of killing had taught Colt to read situations fast, to calculate threats and advantages in the space between heartbeats. But nothing in those years had prepared him for this moment, trapped between a child's love for a ghost and a widow's quiet dignity. The weight of Blackwood's blood money seemed to drag at his very soul. "Coffee would be welcome, Mom," he heard himself say, "if it's not too much trouble." No trouble at all. Rosalie's smile held more grace than he deserved. "Micah, let the man breathe. He's come a long way." She had no idea how far, Colt thought, or how much further he had yet to go, now that this morning had changed everything. As he followed them into the warmth of their home, his back to the killing cold outside, He felt the first stirrings of something he'd thought long dead. The possibility of choosing a different ending to this story. The coffee was exactly as Rosalie had described, bitter and too strong. Colt wrapped his calloused hands around the chipped enamel cup, watching steam rise in the cabin's dim light. Blackwood's payment sat heavy in his vest pocket, each bill marked with the weight of what he'd agreed to do, what he no longer could. Duke Micah had finally fallen asleep in his chair, slumping against Colt's arm with the pure trust of childhood. Every few minutes, the boy's fingers would tighten on Colt's sleeve, as if afraid his father might disappear again. Each tiny grip twisted something deeper in Colt's chest. He looks so much like his father when he sleeps, Rosalie said softly, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Same way of holding on, like he's afraid the world might slip away if he doesn't. Colt gently shifted the boy's head to a more comfortable position. Mrs. Quinn, Rosalie, please, after all, my son thinks you're his father. Her smile held no bitterness, only a weary sort of grace. I suppose you're here about the land. You know who sent me. She nodded. Blackwood's not subtle. First his lawyers, then his threats, then that mysterious fire that took half our home. Her eyes met his. Now you, though I admit you're not what I expected. Colt pulled the money from his vest, laying it on the table between them. Blood money, meant to pay for their deaths. I can't do it, he said simply, but that doesn't mean someone else won't. There's nowhere for us to go. Rosalie's voice remained steady, though her hands trembled slightly. This land, this home, it's all Thomas left us, all he died for. I won't let Blackwood take it. He won't stop, I know. She touched the money, then pushed it back toward him. But I won't run. I can't raise my children to believe that evil always wins. Colt looked down at Micah, peaceful in sleep, then at the money that suddenly seemed to carry the weight of every life he'd ever taken. 20 years of being the shadow that other men sent to do their dirty work. 20 years of telling himself it was just business, nothing personal. But this felt personal. Maybe it was the way Micah had looked at him with his father's eyes. Maybe it was Rosalie's quiet strength, or the new life she carried. Or maybe he'd finally found a line he couldn't cross, a shadow he couldn't become. He stood carefully, laying Micah back in the chair. The boy stirred but didn't wake. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the frost in shades of gold and promise. Colt had always done his killing before dawn. Easier that way, when the world was still grey and undefined. But now, in the clear light of morning, he saw his path with sudden clarity. Pack what you can carry, he said, turning back to Rosalie. Clothes, food, anything valuable but small. We've got maybe a day before Blackwood expects word. What are you suggesting? We fake your deaths. Make it look like the cabin caught fire with you inside. Give me time to get you somewhere safe, somewhere Blackwood won't think to look. He picked up the money. This'll help us start over. Us? Her eyes searched his face. I'm marked now either way. Once Blackwood realizes I've turned, he'll want me dead as much as you. Colt managed a grim smile. Besides, seems God or fate, or whatever's out there has a plan. Might as well see it through. Rosalie stood, one hand supporting her back, the other extended toward him. Why? Why risk everything for people you don't even know? Colt took her hand, surprised by its strength. Maybe because I'm tired of being the man people expect me to be. Maybe because your boy saw something in me I thought died years ago. He glanced at the sleeping child. Or maybe because sometimes a man needs to choose what kind of ghost he wants to become. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. I'll wake Micah. We can be ready in an hour. As she moved away, Colt caught a glimpse of their reflection in the window, the pregnant widow, the sleeping boy, and the gunslinger who'd come to kill them now standing guard instead. An unlikely family, born in the space between one life and another, between what was and what could be. Outside, winter was coming, but for the first time in years, Colt felt warm. The false grave markers had to look real. That's what Colt kept telling himself as he worked in the pre-dawn darkness. 3 wooden crosses, weathered with sand and scored to look months old. He'd placed them far enough from the cabin to suggest A family trying to keep their dead close, but not so far that casual observers would go looking. Sometimes the best lies were the ones people told themselves. "Everything's packed," Rosalie whispered, appearing beside him like a ghost. She'd traded her dress for men's trousers and a loose shirt that hidden her condition. "Micah's ready too, though he doesn't quite understand why we're playing this game." Colt hammered the last cross into the frozen ground. "Better he thinks it's a game. Kids talk, and where we're going, talk is dangerous." He straightened, checking his work. Thomas Quinn read the first cross. Rosalie Quinn and Micah Quinn completed the grim tableau. The irony wasn't lost on him, a killer creating fake deaths to preserve life. "The cabin's prepared?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. He'd spent hours arranging every detail. Rosalie nodded. "Just like you said, furniture broken, signs of struggle, the livestock's been let loose with brands scratched out." Her voice caught, "Our clothes torn and bloodied just inside the door, and the special touches, the locket with my picture partially melted in the fireplace. Micah's toy soldier, the one he never goes anywhere without, dropped by the back door like he tried to run." She hugged herself against more than just the cold. "Will anyone really believe it?" "They'll believe what Blackwood tells them to believe." Colt checked the horizon, still dark enough for what came next. People see what they expect to see. Right now, all they expect is tragedy. He led her back to where their horses waited, hidden in a stand of pine. Micah sat atop Colt's stallion, wrapped in blankets and trying hard to be brave. The boy had cried when they buried his toy soldier, not understanding why he couldn't keep it. Some sacrifices couldn't be explained, only endured. "Remember," Colt said, helping Rosalie mount, "no looking back once we start. No matter what you hear or see, promise me." She met his eyes, understanding darkening her face. "What are you going to do?" "Give them something to find." He pressed Thomas Quinn's Bible into her hands, the one piece of their past he'd insisted they keep. "Head north along the creek bed. I'll catch up before noon. But trust me." He surprised himself by touching her cheek, a gesture somewhere between comfort and promise. "I've spent 20 years learning how men think, how they follow trails. Sometimes the best way to hide truth is to bury it in blood." Micah reached for him, suddenly anxious. "You're coming with us, right, Mr. Colt?" The title hurt more than Papa had, but it was safer this way. Better the boy know him for who he was than live a lie. "Soon as I can, partner. You take care of your mama till then." He watched them disappear into the darkness, two shadows becoming one with the night. Then he turned to his final task, the one that would seal their fate one way or another. The cabin had to burn, but not all at once. It had to tell a story of invasion, violence, desperate struggle. He'd used animal blood to paint the tale, scattered personal belongings in telling ways. A overturned table here, a broken chair there, signs of someone trying to protect what they loved and failing. As he worked, Colt remembered other fires, other deaths, but this time felt different. This time the flames would burn away an old life instead of ending one. The smoke would carry away Colt, the killer, leaving... what? He wasn't sure yet. Maybe that was the point. He saved the drawing for last, Micah's family portrait, the one that had started all this. Let them find it, he thought, carefully burning just the edges. Let them see what they'd tried to destroy. The sun was rising. By the time he mounted his second horse, a wild-looking mare he'd caught specifically for this. She fought the bit, adding to the impression of desperate flight. Good. Let her hooves tell their own story of a killer fleeing justice. Behind him, smoke rose from the cabin's chimney. Normal cooking smoke. Nothing suspicious. Not yet. But by midnight, the whole valley would be ablaze, and 3 more souls would join the territory's ever-growing tally of the dead. Except this time, death was just another lie. One final ghost story from a man who'd spent his life dealing in endings. But as Colt rode north, following tracks only he could read, he realized this might be the first time his lies had ever served the cause of life instead of death. The mare fought him again, eager to run. He let her. Sometimes the best getaway was the one that looked exactly like what your enemies expected to see. Rosalie's wedding ring caught the firelight as she stirred the meager stew, the gold band a reminder of the life they'd left behind. 3 days into their journey, and already the wilderness was testing their resolve. The mountains loomed ahead, their snow-capped peaks promising both refuge and danger. "Careful with the portions," Colt advised, returning from his perimeter. "Check. We've got harder days ahead." "I know how to stretch a meal," Rosalie replied, though there was no bite in her words. They'd settled into an uneasy rhythm, bound together by necessity and something neither dared name. "Did you see any signs?" "Nothing fresh. Storms coming, though. 2 days, maybe less." He didn't mention the other signs he'd seen, broken branches that spoke of recent passage, horse droppings that weren't from wild stock. Someone was following their cold trail, though they were far enough ahead to stay safe. For now, Micah emerged from their makeshift shelter, wrapped in Colt's spare coat. The boy had stopped asking about going home, but his eyes held questions that cut deeper than words. He settled beside Colt with the easy trust of childhood, leaning against the gunslinger's arm for warmth. "Tell me about the mountains again," Micah whispered, as if sharing a secret. "The ones where we're going." Colt caught Rosalie's glance, sharp, protective, but continued the story he'd been spinning over their evening fires. "There's a valley up there, hidden where 2 peaks meet. Good water, deep caves, game aplenty. Place where a family could disappear for a season or 2. Or forever," he didn't add. "Will there be other children?" The question hung in the frigid air. Rosalie's hand went to her belly, a gesture that had become more frequent as the journey wore on. The baby was active tonight, kicking against the future they were running toward. "Not at first," Colt answered carefully. "But soon you'll have a little brother or sister to look after." He hesitated, then added, "Family isn't always about who's around you. Sometimes it's about who you choose to become." Rosalie turned away, but not before Colt caught the shimmer of tears in her eyes. She'd been strong, stronger than anyone had a right to expect, but pregnancy and hard travel were taking their toll. Her wedding ring had grown loose on her finger, a small detail that worried him more than he let on. "I chose you," Micah declared, with a child's simple certainty. "And you chose us. That's what Mama says about family, that sometimes God gives. You the one you need, not the one you expected." Colt's throat tightened. He'd killed men for saying less meaningful things. "Your mama's a wise woman. She says that too." Micah yawned, fighting sleep. "Will you teach me to shoot when we get there?" "Micah," Rosalie's voice carried a warning. "Not to hurt anyone," the boy added quickly. "Just to hunt, to help." Colt met Rosalie's eyes over the fire. In them, he saw the same conflict he felt, the desire to preserve innocence warring with the need to survive. Finally, she nodded, just slightly. "We'll see," Colt said. "For now, you help by being smart, by staying quiet when we say, and moving fast when we need to." Micah nodded solemnly, another yawn overtaking him. Within minutes, he was asleep against Colt's side, his breathing deep and trusting. Later, after they'd moved Micah to the shelter, Rosalie sat beside Colt at the fire. Without a word, she slipped her wedding ring off and pressed it into his palm. "I can't keep it," she said softly. "It's too dangerous, too easy to identify. But I can't bear to throw it away either." Colt studied the simple band, worn smooth by years of love and work. "I'll keep it safe, until we're truly free." "Will we ever be?" He didn't answer immediately, watching the flames dance. "Freedom's not a place," he finally said. "It's a decision. Every day we decide who we are, who we trust, who we love." He closed his fingers around the ring. "Sometimes the bravest thing is choosing to believe in tomorrow." Rosalie's hand found his in the darkness, warm despite the mountain chill. They sat there, not speaking, while the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, the storm, the pursuit, the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. But for now, in this moment, they were Simply three souls forging something new from the ashes of what they'd left behind. The ring in Colt's pocket felt like a promise, or maybe a prayer. James the Hawk. Hawkins ran his finger down the leather-bound journal's latest entry, ink still wet in the cold morning air. 20 years of manhunting had taught him to record everything, every track, every sign, every gut instinct that might lead to prey. Mercer's slipping, he muttered, studying the cabin's charred remains. Getting old, or soft. The scene was perfect. Too perfect. Like a story someone wanted him to read. He'd known Colt Mercer longer than most men lived, had tracked him a few times too, though never with intent to kill. Professional courtesy, they called it. But now Blackwood's money had changed the rules of their deadly game. 3 graves, fresh dug but weathered artificial, he wrote in his journal. Animal blood, not human. Cabin burned strategic, not savage. Horse tracks leading east, obvious, meant to be followed. He smiled grimly. Real trail goes north, following the creek. Clever, but not clever enough. The younger men Blackwood had sent with him shifted uneasily in their saddles. They knew his reputation, the man who'd never lost a trail, never failed. To bring back proof of death, the journal was famous in its own right, filled with the last moments of hundreds of fugitives. Sir, one of them, barely old enough to shave, spoke up. Shouldn't we follow them tracks heading east? Hawkins closed his journal with deliberate care. Tell me, boy, you ever know Colt Mercer to fail a contract? No, sir. They say he's never... Exactly. So ask yourself, what would make a man like that turn on 20 years of reputation? He pointed to the graves. 3 crosses, 3 bodies supposed to be burning in that cabin. But he's running with them instead, breaking his own rules. The young man frowned. You saying he's gone soft? I'm saying he's found something worth dying for. Hawkins mounted his horse, checking his rifle's action. And that makes him more dangerous than he's ever been. The journal's weight was familiar against his chest, tucked in his coat pocket where it had rode for 2 decades. Its pages held the stories of countless men's final days, their desperate flights, their futile hopes, their last stands. Now it would record one more tale, perhaps the most interesting yet. Mercer's protecting them, he continued, tasting the truth of it. Woman's pregnant, according to Blackwood. Child 2, boy of 6 or 7. Man like Colt, living by the gun all these years. Maybe he's decided he wants something different before the devil comes calling. The younger men exchanged glances, not understanding, but Hawkins did. He'd seen it before. Killers trying to wash their hands clean, seeking redemption in acts of mercy. It never ended well. Mercy made men predictable, gave them weaknesses that could be exploited. We camp here tonight, he ordered. Study the scene proper. Tomorrow we head north, following the creek. They've got 3-4 days on us, but they're slow with the woman. We'll catch them before they reach the high country. Later, by firelight, he made his final entry for the day. Colt's playing a deeper game than usual. The violence here tells 2 stories. One for fools, one for hunters who know his work. He's laid false trails with the skill of a man who knows he's being followed by the best. But he's forgotten what makes me different from other hunters. I don't track bodies or horses, or broken branches. I track the desperate choices men make when they're trying to become something new. He's running towards something, not just away. The high country offers caves, game, shelter from winter, but more than that, it offers the promise of transformation. A man, a woman, a child, and another on the way. A ready-made family for a killer trying to outrun his past. Poor fool doesn't realize. Men like us don't get to change. We don't get happy endings. The only peace we find is in the ground. Hawkins closed the journal and stared into the fire. Tomorrow they'd begin the real hunt, and for the first time in years, he felt truly alive. This wouldn't be just another killing. This would be art, a masterpiece of destruction worthy of its own chapter in his leather-bound book of endings. Sleep well, old friend, he whispered to the northern wind. Your story's already written. You just don't know it yet. The old trapper's cabin appeared like a miracle through the swirling snow, a solid shadow against winter's growing fury. Colt cleared it with his gun drawn, checking every corner before helping Rosalie and Micah inside. The previous owner's body lay peacefully in a shallow grave out back, marked by a crude cross. Natural causes, from the look of things. Small mercies. "It's not much," he said, surveying the single room with its sturdy walls and patched roof. "But it'll hold till the storm passes." Rosalie sank onto a rough-hewn chair, one hand pressed against her lower back. The journey had been hard on her, though she never complained. "It's perfect," she whispered, and meant it. After a week of freezing nights under makeshift shelters, even this humble space felt like a palace. Micah was already exploring, his natural curiosity overwhelming exhaustion. "Look!" He pointed to the walls, covered in stretched furs and crude drawings. "The man who lived here was an artist too." Colt busied himself with the potbelly stove, grateful for the dry wood stacked nearby. "Trappers get lonely, drawing helps. Pass the time." He didn't mention that most of the pictures were maps, detailed renderings of the surrounding valleys and peaks, marked with the previous owner's trap lines and game trails. Information that might prove valuable later, as warmth slowly filled the cabin. They fell into what had become their routine. Rosalie sorted their dwindling supplies while Colt secured the perimeter. Micah helped where he could, chattering about the adventures he imagined the trapper must have had. "Was he a good man?" the boy asked suddenly, studying a particularly detailed drawing of a bear. Colt paused in his work. "What makes you ask that? You always check your gun when you think bad men might be near. But you didn't check it in here." "Not really." Sometimes the boy's perception startled him. "Yeah," Colt said softly. "I reckon he was good, lived honest, died peaceful. That's more than most can hope for." Later, after a simple meal of jerky and dried beans, they sat around the stove's warm glow. The storm howled outside, but in here they were dry and safe. For the moment at least. Rosalie had found an old deck of cards and was teaching Micah to play Go Fish. The boys' laughter filled the cabin, bright as summer in winter's heart. Colt watched them from his post by the window, feeling something. Unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Peace, maybe, or purpose. "Your turn," Micah called to him. "Mama says you have to play too. Family rules. Family rules." The words should have terrified him. Instead, they felt right, like a key fitting a lock he hadn't known he carried. He joined them on the floor, his gun within reach but no longer the center of his world. Rosalie dealt him in, her fingers brushing his as she passed the cards. The touch lingered, warm as the stove's glow. "I'm not very good at cards," he warned. "That's okay," Micah assured him seriously. "Mama says it's not about winning, it's about being together." Rosalie smiled, but Colt caught the worry behind her eyes. They both knew this shelter was temporary. That danger still stalked their trail. Tomorrow, they'd need to move on, push higher into the mountains before the passes closed completely. But tonight they could pretend. Pretend they were just a family waiting out a storm. Pretend the world outside didn't want them dead. Pretend that love and courage were enough to buy a future. "Got any threes?" Micah asked, and Colt solemnly handed over his card. The boys' victory dance made Rosalie laugh, really laugh, for the first time in days. The sound seemed to fill the cabin with light, pushing back the shadows that had followed them from their old lives. Later, after Micah had fallen asleep wrapped in furs, Rosalie joined Colt by the window. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the snow erase their tracks. "He needs this," she said finally, "these moments. Something to hold on to when things get hard again. We all do." Colt's hand found hers in the darkness. "Sometimes hope is as vital as bread." She leaned against him just slightly. "Is it wrong? Finding happiness in the middle of running for our lives?" "No," he said, and realized he believed it. Maybe it's the only thing that makes the running worthwhile. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the trapper's cabin, something fragile and precious was taking root. Like spring flowers pushing through mountain snow, love could bloom in the unlikeliest places. Even in the heart of a killer learning to be a father. Even in the space between one life and the next. The military medal caught the firelight as Colt turned it in his fingers, its tarnished surface reflecting dancing shadows. He rarely looked at it anymore. This relic from another life, when he'd worn a different kind of uniform and fought for something bigger than money. You were a soldier. Rosalie's voice was soft, careful not to wake Micah, who slept nearby. The storm had trapped them in the cabin for a second day, forcing intimacy through proximity. Union cavalry, served under Sherman. He could still smell the smoke of burning Georgia, hear the screams of a world on fire. Did things during the war that needed doing. Ugly things, but at least we believed in the cause. What changed? Colt slipped the medal back into his shirt pocket, where it had rested against his heart for 15 years. After the war, lot of us couldn't find our way back to normal life. Skills we had, they weren't meant for peace. Started doing security for railroad companies, then private contracts. His voice roughened. Turns out killing's killing, whether you're wearing blue or black. Rosalie shifted closer, drawn by the raw honesty in his words. Thomas was in the war too. Confederate side. Used to say the same thing, that some men came back carrying more than just scars. Your husband, he was a good man, the best. Her hand went to her belly, protective. He saw the future in everything, in the land, in Micah, in the baby. We didn't know was coming. Said a man's real worth wasn't in what he'd done, but in what he chose to do next. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Outside, the wind howled like lost souls, seeking redemption. Tell me about him, Colt said suddenly. The real him, not just the ghost Micah draws. Rosalie's eyes grew distant with memory. He was gentle, good with numbers and maps, terrible at cards, she smiled. Had this laugh that would fill a room. Taught Micah to read using the Bible and dime novels, said a boy should know both God's truth and man's stories. He know about Blackwood? The danger? He suspected. Her voice hardened. That's why he filed every paper legal and proper, paid every fee. Said a man could smell trouble coming like rain. You just had to know the signs. Colt nodded. He'd read those papers, seen the careful documentation. A surveyor's precision applied to protecting his family's future. The hunting accident wasn't an accident. Rosalie's hands clenched in her skirt. Thomas came home that night bleeding. Said he'd refused Blackwood's offer, told him the land wasn't for sale at any price. Said I should take Micah and run if he didn't. She broke off. Tears, finally breaking through her careful control. Without thinking, Colt pulled her close, feeling her shoulders shake with silent sobs. I couldn't run, she whispered against his chest. This land, this home, it was his dream for us, for our children. Running felt like letting them kill him twice. And now? Now I understand what he meant about choices. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Sometimes staying is courage, but sometimes leaving is too. Sometimes the bravest thing is letting go of what was, so you can hold on to what might be. Colt touched her cheek, wiping away a tear with a gentleness that surprised them both. This close, he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, the strength beneath her sorrow. I've killed a lot of men, he said roughly. Some deserved it, some probably didn't. Never asked, never cared. Was easier that way. His hand dropped to the medal. But your Thomas was right. A man's worth is in his choices, and I choose this, choosing you, choosing Micah, choosing whatever future we can carve out of these mountains, even if it means becoming someone else. Maybe it means becoming who I was supposed to be all along. He managed to smile. Besides, your boy's already decided I'm family. Can't disappoint him now. As if hearing his name, Micah stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about horses. They both watched him, this child who had brought them together through innocent faith and desperate circumstance. I'm scared, Rosalie admitted quietly. Not of dying. I've been scared of that since Thomas. Scared of hoping, scared of believing in something good again. Colt understood. Hope was dangerous, more dangerous than bullets sometimes, but as he held her, feeling the new life stirring beneath her heart, he realized he'd rather die believing in this fragile dream than live another day as the shadow he'd become. "Then I'll believe enough for both of us," he said, "until you're ready." The medal pressed against his chest, a reminder of the man he'd been before the world hardened him. Maybe Thomas Quinn had been right about more than just land and ledgers. Maybe sometimes a man had to lose everything to find what he was meant to protect. The damaged compass spun uselessly in Colt's palm, its needle dancing like a drunk at a wake. The storm had turned the world white and hostile, stealing direction from even the mountains themselves. What had started as heavy snow had become something darker, a killer's weather, the kind that erased bodies until spring thaw. "We can't." "Stay here!" he shouted over the wind's howl. Their shelter, a shallow cave barely deep enough for three, offered little protection from the growing cold. "Cave's too exposed. Temperature drops much more. We'll freeze." Rosalie huddled closer to Micah, sharing what warmth they had left. The boy's lips had taken on a bluish tinge that scared Colt more than any gun he'd ever faced. "The trappers' cabin 2 days back, if we could even find it." Colt checked their remaining supplies. Food for maybe 3 days, ammunition running low, medical supplies almost gone. We push forward. "There's a valley I know, just over the next ridge. Deep. Caves, old mining camp. If we can make it." A sound cut through the storm's fury, distant but distinct. Gunshot. "They found us?" Rosalie's voice remained steady, though her arms tightened around Micah. "No. Warning shot, probably. Letting us know they're close." Colt's mind raced through options, each worse than the last. "They're trying to herd us, drive us toward the ridge face where there's no cover." Another shot closer. The storm was working for their pursuers now, forcing them toward the only possible path. Micah looked up, his face too calm for a child his age. "Like the wolves do to deer. Mama told me about that." "Smart boy." Colt managed a smile he didn't feel. "Too smart to let some wolves catch him, right?" The boy nodded solemnly. "I'm not scared." "Good, because we're going to play a trick on them." Colt pulled out the map he'd memorized from the trapper's cabin walls. The compass might be useless, but he'd been studying these mountains since they found shelter. "There's a cut through the ridge. Narrow, dangerous in this weather, but they won't expect us to try it." "Because it's crazy?" Rosalie's attempt at humor couldn't hide her fear. "Because it's living." He touched her cheek, no longer bothering to hide his feelings. "And we've got more reason to live than they do to kill." They moved fast, abandoning anything that would slow them down. Colt took Micah on his back, letting Rosalie focus on keeping her footing on the treacherous slope. The wind tried to tear them from the mountain's face, while the snow did its best to blind them. Another shot, but farther now. Their pursuers had lost their trail in the whiteout conditions. Small mercies. The cut appeared exactly where Colt remembered, a jagged wound in the ridge's granite face. In better weather, it would have been merely dangerous. In this storm, it was suicide. "We can't," Rosalie gasped, seeing the narrow path. "The baby." "Trust me." Colt shifted Micah to her arms. "I'll go first. Test each step. You follow exactly where I step, nothing else. Hold the boy tight." The next 20 minutes aged him more than 20 years of killing had. Each step could have been their last, each gust of wind a potential executioner. He felt his way forward, like a blind man, using the rock face as guide and anchor. Behind him, Rosalie's breathing came in sharp bursts, but she kept moving. Micah stayed silent, understanding without being told that noise could shake loose more than just snow. Halfway through, the storm reached its peak. The wind's howl became a living thing, clawing at them with Arctic fury. Colt's hands went numb, then burning, then numb again. His world narrowed to the next step, the next handhold, the next breath. Then Rosalie screamed. He turned in time to see her slip. Micah clutched tight against her chest. Without thought, his body moved, catching her arm as her feet went out from under her. For one eternal moment, they hung suspended between stone and air, 3 lives balanced on the strength of one man's grip. "I've got you," he growled through clenched teeth. "I've got you both." Using strength he didn't know he had left, Colt pulled them back to safety. They huddled against the rock face, hearts pounding in terrible synchronicity. "Look," Micah whispered. Through a break in the storm, they could see the valley below. And there, nestled against the mountain's protective bulk, stood the old mining camp. Shelter, safety, hope. Colt pulled them close, feeling Rosalie's tears freeze against his coat. They weren't safe yet, might never be truly safe again, but they were alive, and together, and for now, that was enough. The broken compass hung forgotten at his side. Sometimes he realized the heart was a better guide than any machine, especially when it finally knew where home might be. The torn map fluttered in the winter wind, its ripped edges a testament to sudden violence. Colt stared at the familiar markings, the same ones he'd studied in the trapper's cabin, now rendered in fresh ink on expensive paper. Only one person could have drawn this. Old Samuel, the mining camp's caretaker, who'd promised them shelter and safety just 2 days ago. "Damn fool trusted him," Colt muttered, crushing the map in his fist. They'd been so grateful to find another soul up here, someone who offered them hot food and real beds, someone who listened to their story and promised to keep their secrets, someone who'd been waiting for them all along. "How long do we have?" Rosalie whispered, already packing what little they could carry. Her movements were measured, careful. A woman who'd learned that panic was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Hour, maybe less." Colt checked his ammunition again. 5 rounds, not enough. "Samuel's gone. Probably rode out last night after we slept. The map shows the fastest route through the valley." Hawkins. The name had become a prayer and curse. Both has to be. Nobody else would pay enough to make a man betray his mountain code. Colt helped Micah into his warmest clothes, noting how the boy didn't complain or question anymore, too young to be so old. Samuel marked all the caves, all the hiding spots we talked about. They'll have men at every exit. Rosalie's hand went to her belly, where the baby had been restless all morning, as if it knew. "What do we do?" Before Colt could answer, Micah spoke up. "We tricked them again, like with the storm." They both turned to the boy, who was studying the torn map with his father's surveyor's eye. "What do you mean, son?" The word slipped out naturally now, felt right in ways Colt was still learning to understand. Micah pointed to the paper. "See? The man drew where he thinks we'll go, so we go somewhere else." "Somewhere else isn't marked," Rosalie said gently. "We could get lost." No. Colt saw it now, what the boy's innocent wisdom had grasped. Not lost. Free. He smoothed out the crumpled map. Samuel marked every safe path, every smart choice. "So we make a dumb one, something no sane person would try." Understanding dawned in Rosalie's eyes. "The mine shaft." "You can't be serious." Fear crept into her voice. "Those tunnels have been abandoned for decades. They could collapse, we could get trapped." "Could," Colt agreed, "but Hawkins won't expect it. Man like him, he thinks like a hunter, expects his prey to run for daylight, for known ground." He touched the map's torn edge. "Sometimes the most dangerous path is the safest, just because nobody else would choose it." A sound echoed through the valley, horses' hooves on frozen ground, multiple riders moving fast. No time to debate. Colt shoved the map into his coat. "Micah, remember how we talked about being brave?" The boy nodded, already reaching for his mother's hand. "Like the soldiers in your stories." "Braver." Colt checked the mineshaft's entrance, half hidden behind years of overgrowth. "We go in quiet, stay close to the wall. I'll lead. No light until we're deep enough to hide it." "What if it's a dead end?" Rosalie's voice shook, but her spine was steel. "Then we make our stand in the dark." He touched her cheek, letting himself memorize the feel of her skin, just in case. "But we make it together." They slipped into the earth's maw as the first shouts reached them. The darkness was absolute, a living thing that pressed against their skin and stole the air from their lungs. Colt led them by touch and memory, recalling the mind maps he'd studied in younger days when he'd been hunting different kinds of men. Behind them, voices echoed off stone. Hawkins' men spreading out to search, but they were looking for tracks in snow, for signs in sunlight. They weren't prepared for this lightless maze of tunnels and terror. "Hold up," Colt whispered after 10 minutes of careful progress. "Need to get our bearings. I hear water," Micah said softly. "Like in the stories about underground rivers." Colt smiled in the dark, proud despite their danger. "Good ears. That's our way out. These tunnels connect to natural caves. Water's been carving paths longer than men have been making maps." A sudden rumble shook loose dirt from above. Someone had dynamited one of the entrances, probably trying to flush them out, not realizing they were already deeper in the warren than any sane person would go. "They're scared," Rosalie realized, wonder in her voice. "The great hawk and his men, afraid to follow us down here. Fear's got its uses." Colt found her hand in the darkness, squeezed it gently. "Keeps men from seeing what's right in front of them. Like an old mine shaft that comes up behind their camp, where they've left their fresh horses." Hope flickered like a match in the darkness. They weren't safe, wouldn't be truly safe until they'd put states between them and Hawkins' vengeance. But they were together, choosing their own path, making their own light. Sometimes betrayal was just another word for opportunity. Sometimes the darkness was where you found your way home. The handmade baby blanket, carefully knitted during quiet evenings at the trapper's cabin, now served as a makeshift pillow beneath Rosalie's head. They'd found temporary shelter in a deep cave far from the mine's main tunnels, where an underground spring provided both water and a natural alarm system against pursuit. Any approach would disturb the pool's surface, sending ripples to warn them. "Breathe," Colt urged, holding Rosalie's, and as another contraction seized her. "Like the waves, remember? Rise and fall." Bit hard to think of waves in a cave, she managed through clenched teeth. But she tried, focusing on his voice, his touch, anything but the fear that this child would enter the world in darkness. Hunted and homeless, Micah sat nearby, carefully folding the clean rags they'd salvaged from their supplies. His small face was serious with responsibility. "Is the baby coming now?" "Soon," Colt answered, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. He'd helped birth horses in his cavalry days, but this was different. This was Rosalie. This was family. Another contraction hit, stronger than before. Rosalie's grip threatened to break his fingers, but Colt welcomed the pain. It gave him something to focus on, besides their desperate situation. Tell me again about where we're going," she gasped. When the pain eased, the place after the mountains. Colt dabbed her forehead with a cool cloth, breathing in the mineral scent of underground water. "Little town in Oregon, coastal place where nobody asks questions. Man I knew from the war, runs a newspaper there, says he needs a bookkeeper." He smiled. "Reckon a surveyor's widow knows her way around numbers. And you?" Her eyes found his in the lantern's dim light. "Town that size always needs a deputy, someone who knows trouble and how to stop it before it starts." He touched her cheek. "Someone looking to protect rather than hunt." The next contraction came before she could respond. And this time, Rosalie couldn't hold back a cry of pain. The sound echoed off the cave walls, transforming into something primitive and powerful. "Mama?" Micah's voice trembled. "It's all right, son." Colt kept his voice steady. "Your mama's strong, stronger than any of us, and that little sister or brother of yours just wants to meet you. How do you know it's time? That everything will be okay?" Colt thought about lying, about offering false certainty, but they'd come. Too far for anything but truth. "I don't know for sure. Nobody ever does. But sometimes faith is more important than knowing. Sometimes love is enough." Rosalie's labor progressed as the hours crept by, marked only by the steady drip of water and the rhythm of her breathing. Colt sent Micah to rest, promising to wake him when the time came. The boy curled up in their last blanket, his father's. Old Bible clutched to his chest like a shield. Tell me true," Rosalie whispered during a brief respite. Are we going to make it? Colt studied her face, lined with exhaustion but still beautiful, still undefeated. Yes, he said, and was surprised to realize he believed it. Yes, we're going to make it, all of us. The baby came with the last of their lantern oil, announcing itself with a cry that sounded like defiance. A girl, small but perfect, with her mother's determination and her brother's will to survive. Hope, Rosalie breathed, cradling her daughter. Her name is Hope. Micah woke to the sound, crawling over to meet his sister. His face, when he saw her, held the same wonder Colt felt in his own heart. She's so tiny, the boy whispered. But she's not afraid at all. No, Colt agreed, watching his new daughter grip his finger with surprising strength. No, she's not afraid. She's got her mama's courage and her brother's heart. Rosalie smiled through her exhaustion. And her father's strength. The word hung. Between them, a truth too large for the cave's confines. Colt felt its weight, its responsibility, its promise. Father, not by blood or law, but by choice, by love. The baby blanket, stained now with birth but still soft with promise, wrapped hope in its simple warmth. Rosalie had knitted prayers into every stitch, prayers for safety, for future, for family. Looking at it now, Colt realized those prayers had been answered, just not in any way they could have expected. Outside their cave, Hawkins and his men still searched. Winter still raged, danger still waited. But in here, in this moment, something miraculous had happened. Life had insisted on itself, had pushed through darkness toward light, had chosen hope over fear. Welcome to the family, little one, Colt whispered, and felt the last walls around his heart crumble to dust. We've been waiting for you. The broken pocket watch caught the bullet meant for Colt's heart, shattering in a spray of brass and glass. Thomas Quinn's final gift to his wife, carried in Colt's vest pocket since they'd fled the cabin, had just saved his life. Divine intervention, or cosmic irony. He didn't have time to decide which. Still wearing armor, I see, Hawkins called from behind his cover of broken mining equipment. Always were too careful to die proper. Dawn was breaking outside the mine's entrance, painting the snow in shades of blood and gold. They'd almost made it, had the horses in sight when Hawkins and his remaining men cut them off. Now Rosalie and the children were trapped behind Colt in the mine shaft, while death waited in the growing light. Getting slow, James, Colt answered, checking his ammunition. 3 rounds left. Time was, you'd have had me dead to rights. Getting domestic'll do that to a man. Hawkins' voice carried a snake's smile. Playing house with another man's widow, raising his son. Tell me, they worth dying for? Colt felt Micah's hand grip his coat from behind. The boy's touch steadied him more than any gun ever had. Worth living for, he corrected. Something you wouldn't understand. Oh, I understand plenty. A bullet sparked off stone near Colt's head. Understand you've gone soft, lost your edge. The great Colt Mercer, brought low by a woman's tears and a child's trust. Hope began to cry, her newborn, wails echoing off the mine's walls. 5 days old, and already she had her mother's timing. "Shut that brat up!" one of Hawkins' men shouted. "Can't think with—" The rest of his words vanished in gunfire as Colt took advantage of the distraction. 1 shot, 1 kill, just like the old days, except this time he was protecting something instead of destroying it. 2 rounds left, he muttered to Rosalie. "How's our back exit looking?" "Collapsed in the last cave-in," she whispered. "This is it." Hawkins' laugh carried across the killing ground. "Know what your problem is, Colt. You still think like a soldier. Honor, duty, protecting the innocent. Another bullet, closer this time. But out here, we're all just animals. Survival's the only truth. You're wrong." Micah's voice rang out clear and unafraid. "Mr. Colt's not an animal. He's my papa now." Silence fell, broken only by Hope's softening cries. Then Hawkins spoke again, something different in his voice. "Boy's got spirit, I'll give him that. Tell you what, Colt, send the widow and kids out. I'll give you my word they make it to the next town alive." "Your word?" Colt couldn't help but laugh. "Like the word you gave all those men in your journal?" The ones who died believing your promises? Better than watching them die here. A pause. You know I never miss twice. Colt touched the shattered watch in his pocket. One chance, one mistake, that's all it would take, Rosalie, he whispered. If I draw his fire... No, her hand found his in the shadows. We chose this path together. We face what comes together. Hope had quieted, soothed by her mother's steady heartbeat. Micah pressed closer, his father's old Bible clutched to his chest like armor. Together, the boy echoed. Something shifted in Colt's chest. Not fear, not anger, but certainty, clear as dawn, sharp as a bullet. This was what he'd been becoming, all those years of death and shadow. Not a killer learning to love, but a protector, who'd lost his way until a child's faith brought him home. Last chance, Colt, Hawkins called. Don't make me kill a family man. Colt touched the watch one more time, feeling the bullet lodged in its ruined heart. Then he smiled. You already tried, he said softly and moved. The world narrowed to heartbeats and gunfire. Colt rolled left while shooting right, letting muscle memory guide his aim. Hawkins, expecting desperation, had crept closer for a killing shot. Instead, he met the man who'd earned his reputation one bullet at a time. 2 shots rang out as one. Colt felt fire graze his shoulder, smelled powder and blood, but his own shot, his last round, flew true. Hawkins staggered, surprise replacing the snake's smile. His journal fell from his coat, pages scattering like dead leaves in the morning wind. Didn't think. You had it left in you, he managed, and died believing he understood what had happened. But he was wrong. The shot that killed him hadn't come from a killer's skill or a soldier's training. It had come from a father's heart, from a protector's. Absolute certainty that nothing would harm his family while he drew breath. The remaining men fled, taking their wounded. They'd signed on to hunt a legend, not to die facing something they didn't understand. Colt turned back to his family now and forever, and saw in their eyes not fear of what he'd done, but love for why he'd done it. Let's go home, he said simply, and led them into the dawn. The 2 bullets lay heavy in Colt's palm, his last ammunition saved through all their running. One for Blackwood, one for himself if things went wrong. At least, that had been the plan when he'd tucked them away. Now, watching dawn break over the small coastal town that would become their home, those bullets felt like anchors to a past. He needed to release. You don't have to go, Rosalie said softly, joining him on the boarding house's porch. Behind them, through the window, Micah sat reading to baby Hope, his voice carrying the same gentle cadence his father had used with him. Man needs to finish what he starts. Colt rolled the bullets between his fingers. Blackwood won't stop. Men like him, they can't let go of what they think they own. And men like you, can they let go of revenge? The question hung in the salt air, heavy with meaning. Below them the Pacific crashed against Oregon's rocky shore, its endless rhythm speaking of time and change, and the wearing away of sharp edges. Told myself it was justice, Colt admitted, for Thomas, for what Blackwood tried to do to you and Micah, for sending Hawkins after us. He opened his hand, letting morning light catch the bullet's brass casings. But maybe I just wanted one last kill, one last chance to be the man I was before you became the man you are. He smiled, despite himself. You always could. See right through me. No. Rosalie touched his cheek, her fingers warm against the morning chill. I see you, the real you, the man who chose love over death, family over vengeance, the man my children call father. The word still caught him sometimes, still felt like a gift he hadn't earned. 2 weeks in their new town, and already Micah had stopped adding the Mr. before Colt's name. Hope knew no other father would. Grow up with his face in her earliest memories. Blackwood's still out there, he said, but the words held less conviction than before. Yes, getting richer, I expect. Building his railroad, buying his power. Rosalie's voice carried no bitterness, only quiet strength. But he's not here. Not in this moment, not in our children's lives, not in our future, unless I make him part of it. Exactly. She took the bullets from his hand, replaced them with her own fingers interlaced with his. Thomas used to say that a man's greatest power isn't in what he can destroy, but in what he chooses to build. What are you choosing to build, Colt Mercer? Through the window, Micah's voice rose and fell, telling his sister tales of brave knights and second chances. The boy had started calling them our stories, not just the ones in books, but the ones they were living, the ones they were writing. Together. Got word of a ranch for sale, Colt said finally. Up the coast a ways, good water rights like Thomas would have wanted, land that needs protecting but not with a gun. Rosalie's smile was brighter than the dawn. Sounds like something. Worth building. Won't be easy. We'd have to work hard, save every penny. Might take years. We have years, she squeezed his hand. We have time. We have each other. Colt looked at the bullets one last time, seeing in their dull shine all the death they represented, all the choices that had led him here, to this porch, to this woman, to this moment of decision. With a sudden motion, he drew back his arm and threw them toward the sea. They caught the light as they arced out over the cliffs, two small stars falling into the endless waves below. "Pa!" Micah called from inside. "Come quick! Hope's trying to grab the book." Pa, such a simple word, but it carried the weight of worlds, of choices, of futures. "Go on," Rosalie whispered. "Your family's waiting." Colt turned away from the sea, from the past, from the man he'd been. Through the window he could see his children, in the warm lamplight. Hope's tiny, hands reaching up, Micah's patient smile as he held the book lower for her. This was justice, he realized, not in death or revenge, but in life, in building something Blackwood could never destroy because he could never understand it, in choosing love's harder path over hatred's familiar road. "Thank you," he said to Rosalie, meaning more than words. It could hold, she understood, as she always did. "Just remember this moment," she said. "When the past comes calling, when the old anger rises, remember what you chose and why." Colt nodded and went inside to his family, leaving the empty horizon and its ghosts behind. Some men spent their lives dealing death, never knowing they were hunting their own redemption. But sometimes, if they were very lucky, they found it in a child's trust, a woman's wisdom, and the simple power of choosing life over death, love over fear, building over destroying. The bullets would rust in the Pacific's depths, forgotten like the man who had once lived by their power. But here, in this room, with his family, Colt Mercer was finally, truly alive. The new land deed lay on the weathered desk between them, its official seal gleaming in the afternoon light. Theodore Blackwood looked older than Colt remembered. Success had made him soft around the edges, though his eyes retained their snake's glitter. "Mercer," Blackwood's voice carried forced casualness. "Heard you were dead." "Heard the same about you," Colt replied evenly. "Seems we both have a habit of disappointing undertakers." 6 months had passed since the bullets found their grave, in the Pacific. Now Colt stood in the railroad baron's Portland office, wearing a deputy's badge and carrying papers instead of guns. Outside, Rosalie waited with the children, ready to sign the final documents that would make the coastal ranch legally theirs. "You've done well for yourself," Blackwood observed, gesturing to the chair Colt hadn't taken. "Law enforcement suits you better than your previous profession." "Everything suits me better than that." Colt finally sat, noting how Blackwood's hand twitched toward his desk drawer. "Don't. You're not fast enough, and we both know it." The land baron's hand stilled. "Why are you here, Mercer? Come to settle old scores?" "No." Colt placed another document on the desk. "Come to settle accounts." Blackwood's eyes narrowed as he read. "This is a legal transfer of the Quinn property, signed by the territorial judge, witnessed by 3 circuit courts." Colt allowed himself a small smile. "Turns out Thomas Quinn was better at paperwork than you expected. Every deed, every survey, every water right, all filed proper and witnessed. Property passes to his widow, free and clear. That land is vital to your railroad." Colt shook his head. "Routes already changed." New survey came through last month. Better grade through the next valley over. Less engineering needed for the bridges. Your own experts signed off on it. Fury flashed across Blackwood's face, quickly masked. You've been busy. Law's funny that way. Works for anybody who takes the time to learn it. Colt tapped the papers. Sign the transfer and we're done. No more hunters, no more running, just business. Properly concluded. And if I refuse, then the territorial marshal gets a very interesting package. Hawkins kept detailed records. Who paid him, who he killed, who ordered what deaths. Man was thorough right up until the end. The threat hung in the air between them, heavy as gun smoke. Finally, Blackwood reached for his pen. You've changed, he said as he signed. The Colt Mercer I knew would have settled this with bullets. Colt Mercer you knew died in those mountains. He watched the ink dry on both documents, the transfer and their new deed. Man can't serve two masters, can't build a future if he's anchored to the past. Blackwood's laugh held no humor. Philosophy from a gunslinger. Will wonders never cease? Not a gunslinger anymore. Colt stood, gathering the papers. Just a rancher with a badge, trying to keep peace in a small town that needs it. And the widow Quinn? She's part of this. New life? My wife's waiting outside with our children. Colt let the words land like bullets, saw them strike home. Family has a way of changing how a man sees the world. Understanding finally dawned in Blackwood's eyes. You really have gone. Straight, playing father to another man's son, raising his child. My son, Colt corrected quietly. My daughter, my wife, my life. He moved to the door. Remember that if you ever think about sending trouble our way again. Remember what a man will do to protect his family. Is that a threat, Deputy Mercer? No. Colt paused in the doorway. It's a father's promise. Outside, in the bright Oregon sunshine, Rosalie looked up from where she sat with the children. Hope, growing strong and clever, reached for him with happy gurgles. Micah clutched his new schoolbooks, proud of learning his letters properly. Everything. Settled? Rosalie asked, reading his face. Everything. He lifted Hope into his arms, felt Micah's small hand slip into his. Land's ours, free and clear, no more looking over our shoulders. They walked together through Portland's bustling streets, a family like any other. No one who passed them could guess their story. The killer who chose love, the widow who chose trust, the boy who chose faith, the baby born in darkness but raised in light. At the notary's office, they signed the final papers. The ranch would need work, fences to mend, fields to plow, stock to raise. But they would build it together, stone by stone, dream by dream. What do you think Thomas would say? Rosalie asked later as they watched the children play in their hotel room. About how it all turned out? Colt thought about the watch that had saved his life, the Bible that had guided their way, the love that had transformed them all. Think he'd say his family found their way home, he answered. Different path than he planned, but the same destination, safety, love, future. Rosalie leaned against him, and together they watched their children write their own story, one page at a time. The family portrait caught the last golden light of day through the ranch house's western window. Rosalie had insisted on having it. Taken to mark their first year on the land, all of them dressed in their Sunday best. Hope balanced on Colt's knee, Micah standing proud between them. The photographer had captured something more than just their faces. He'd somehow caught the quiet joy that filled their home. Still can't believe how much she looks like you, Rosalie said, adjusting the portrait's frame on the mantel. Hope, now walking and talking up a storm, had inherited Colt's determined jaw and steady gaze, though her smile was all Rosalie. Got your spirit, though, Colt replied, watching through the window as Micah taught his sister to feed the chickens. Both of them do. That steel inside that keeps them standing no matter what. The ranch had prospered beyond their hopes. Good water and better luck had turned the coastal property into something Thomas Quinn would have appreciated. A working piece of paradise, built on smart planning and honest labor. The locals had accepted them easily enough, especially after. Colt's badge helped settle a range war without a shot fired. Letter came from back east, Rosalie said, settling beside him. Blackwood's railroad went bankrupt. Seems his new route wasn't as profitable as promised. Colt allowed himself a small smile. Shame about that survey data. Amazing how numbers can add up wrong when honest men check the math. She laughed, the sound as fresh as the day he'd first heard it in that half-burned cabin. Thomas would have appreciated the irony, using his own tools to bring justice. Speaking of tools, Colt nodded toward the barn, where Micah had started teaching Hope the proper way to collect eggs. Boy's got his father's eye for detail. Been helping me update the property maps, learning geometry faster than his teacher can give lessons. Both his fathers, Rosalie corrected gently. He measures twice and cuts once because Thomas taught him through that Bible. But he walks the fence line every morning because you showed him how a man provides for his family. The word still warmed Colt's heart. Family. Such a simple thing. But it had changed everything. The gun belt that had once been like a second skin now hung forgotten in the closet. His hands, once calloused from weapon grips, now bore the honest marks of rope and reins and wooden handles. Thinking about expanding, he said, watching the children head back with their basket of eggs. That piece to the north, where the stream feeds into that sheltered valley. Good grazing land, more than we need for our herd. True, he turned to meet her eyes, but a man should build something to pass on, something his children can grow into. Understanding bloomed in Rosalie's face. And their children after them? If they choose it, if not, he shrugged. Then they'll have options, college funds growing. Micah talks about being a surveyor like Thomas, or maybe a lawman, and Hope wants to run the ranch herself. Told me yesterday she's going to have 100 horses and build a house right next to ours. They shared a smile, remembering their own desperate dreams of just surviving. Now here they were, planning generations ahead, putting down roots deep enough to hold whatever storms might. Come! The door burst open as Hope ran in, proudly holding up an egg, nearly as big as her small hands. Papa, look what I found all by myself. Colt scooped her up, breathing in the sweet smell of hay and sunshine in her hair. That's quite a treasure, little one. Almost as big as you. Micah followed more sedately, carrying the full basket. Check the fence in the south pasture like you showed me, Pa. No breaks, but that one post might need replacing come spring. Good man. Colt felt his chest swell with quiet pride. We'll make a rancher of you yet. Or a surveyor, Micah added with a grin. Or maybe both. Sky's the limit, Rosalie agreed, taking the basket. Now both of you wash up. Dinner's almost ready. As the children clattered off to the washroom, Colt studied the portrait again. The photographer had posed them traditionally. Parent seated, child standing, baby on knee. But there was nothing stiff or formal in their expressions. They looked peaceful, happy, free. Penny for your thoughts, Rosalie said, touching his arm. Just thinking about choices, he replied. About how sometimes the hardest road leads exactly where you were meant to be. She understood, as she always did. And where is that? Colt pulled her close, feeling the life they'd built humming around them, in the children's laughter, in the solid walls, in the land that had given them a future. Home, he said simply, finally home. Colt's old gun hung above the fireplace, its barrel pointing east toward the past they'd left behind. 15 years of dust had settled on it, undisturbed except for Micah's occasional careful cleaning. Not to use it, but to preserve it. To remember. Hard to believe you were ever that man, Micah said, adjusting his deputy's badge as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the ranch in familiar gold. At 21, he'd grown into his father's height and his mother's quiet strength. The one in all those stories. Some days it feels like a dream. Colt's hair had gone grey at the temples, his face lined more by laughter now than hardship. Other days, when I watch you pin on that star, I remember exactly why we ran so far to build all this. Hope's voice carried from the barn where she was teaching her younger siblings, the 2 children Colt and Rosalie had added to their family, about horse handling. At 15, she'd become the ranch's heart, as fierce in protecting their land as her mother had been in saving it. "Got an interesting letter today," Micah said carefully. "From back east. Remember Curtis Walker, Blackwood's old foreman?" Colt's hand tightened on his chair's armrest. "What's he want?" "Says Blackwood's dying, wants to clear his conscience. Sent these." Micah pulled out a stack of papers, along with a full confession about Thomas's murder. "Seems he's found religion in his final days." Colt took the papers, with steady hands. Deeds, contracts, letters, all the evidence they'd never had of Blackwood's crimes. "Your mother should see these." "Already showed her." Micah smiled. "Know what she did? Used them to light the cooking fire. Said the past was best left to warm the present, not rule it." A laugh escaped Colt before he could stop it. "That sounds like your mother." "Our mother," Micah corrected gently. "Just like you're our father. Blood's just one way to make a family. Love's another." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Hope lead her young students through their lessons. She had Thomas's gift for teaching, combined with Rosalie's patience and Colt's protective instincts. The perfect blend of all three parents who had shaped her life. "You ever regret it?" Micah asked suddenly. "Giving up the gun for the plow? Could have stayed the legend, kept the power that came with fear." Colt thought about the man he'd been, about the weight of reputation and the coldness of living by the gun. Then he looked at his son, this boy who'd named him father, with a child's perfect faith now grown into a man who protected others instead of hunting them. "Power's a funny thing," he said finally. "Gun gives you one kind, but love gives you another. Your mother taught me that. You all did, by believing in you, by giving me something worth believing in." The sun dipped lower, sending long shadows across the land they'd built together. From the house came the smell of dinner cooking, the sound of Rosalie singing to their youngest as she worked. The evening stage rumbled past on the new road. Its driver waving friendly greeting. "Got a letter of my own today," Colt said. "Territory's offering me the marshal's position. Full authority from here to the California line." Micah straightened. "You going to take it?" "Thinking on it. Need someone I trust to take over as deputy here while I'm riding circuit." He gave his son a meaningful look. "Someone who knows the difference between justice and vengeance." Pride and understanding dawned in Micah's face. "Learned that from the best." "Learned it from both your fathers," Colt corrected. "Thomas taught you through his example of doing things right. I taught you through my example of doing things wrong. Then finding a better way." Hope's laughter rang out again, followed by the happy shouts of her siblings. The sound carried across the ranch like a benediction, like proof that love could overcome any darkness, given time and trust enough to grow. Colt's old gun caught the last ray of sunset, transforming from weapon to witness. Let it hang there, he thought. Let it remind them all that a man's legacy isn't in what he takes from the world, but in what he builds in it, in the lives he protects, the love he chooses, the family he makes not through blood, but through countless small decisions to be better than he was yesterday. "Come on," he said, standing. "Your mother's waiting. Time to go home." And together, father and son walked into the deepening twilight, toward the light and warmth of the life they'd all chosen. One step at a time,